Tackle street harassment or burglary? The police shouldn't have to choose. This is the question posed by Suzanne Moore of The Guardian. I'm sure this will be a completely balanced and nuanced look at the differences in approach to crimes and the resource management of the police. Oh wait, resources are lacking in our justice system, and apparently it's women and children who come last. Is that so? Let's see if there's any meat to her argument, shall we? Beware common sense, I say. Those who cheer it on are dull enforcers of the status quo. Witness the headlines around Sarah Thornton's comments to the NPC Council. And I'm not joking, the acronym is literally NPCC. About the police not having enough resources to counter misogynist abuse. Well, let's take a look. Sarah Thornton, who is the chair of the aforementioned council, issued a statement to her peers saying that officers shouldn't have to log misogyny complaints and that misogyny should not be a criminal offence. She said, treating misogyny as a hate crime is a concern for some well-organised campaigning organisations. In July, chiefs debated whether we should record such allegations even when no crime is committed. That's one of the key things right there, isn't it? It's an issue for campaign groups who are well organised and, dare I say, of a radical feminist bent, not for the general public. One might say the campaign organisation is harassing the police force, given that the definition of harassment is aggressive pressure or intimidation. Back to the article at hand. The entire tone of it is slightly slimy and more than a little condescending, but it is The Guardian after all, so we will slog on. In the face of calls from pressure groups to police misogynistic incidents, despite the hatred of women being something inferred by the victim rather than proven by the perpetrator and therefore prone to be a corrupt method of determining intent, Suzanne says that most people want more bobbies on the street solving proper crimes, and that's a bad thing because the people are demonising the PC brigade who simply don't want to be hated or abused on the basis of sex, race or disability. Is this perhaps because of the skyrocketing levels of crime in places like, London, where under Sadiq Khan's careful jurisdiction, violent crime went up something in the region of 70%? Isn't it strange that in deprived areas where people are robbed, stabbed, raped, or have their property damaged, most citizens would rather have a physical presence on the street deterring incidents than that the police criminalise an intent rather than an action and then let the perceived victim determine what that intent is? This isn't going to be open to abuse at all, is it? She goes on to say, thus common sense is pitted against out-of-control political correctness, as though I have the simple ultimatum of having my burglary solved or reporting wolf whistling to the police. The terms in which this is all debated are antediluvian. That's old-fashioned, for those wondering. I have never had a burglary solved, nor ever really expected to. I have had very PC policemen sit in my living room telling me they understand how being burgled makes a person feel violated, as they too have been violated. Oh, is that by their higher-ups in the PC brigade? But any suggestion of catching the bastard? Never. Have you considered, Suzanne, that that's due to the diversion of resources on a mass scale to tackle online hate crime? A statement which sounds very good in theory until you realise that hate crime is so broadly defined and the training given to said police so antithetical to the expression of facts around things like immigration, the grooming gang scandals, etc., that effectively we are paying a huge number of individuals, over 300 in London alone, to prosecute mean comments on Twitter, prosecute people for posting rap lyrics because they have the wrong level of melanin in their skin, or fining people for telling jokes. This is not dealing with hate crime because in the eyes of the legislation, hate crime means disagreeing with someone and that person crying hate. Or it's someone posting a statistical fact, such as over 90% of grooming gang rapists being Islamic and of Pakistani descent, often without extra comment attached, and this being classed as a hateful thing to say. There is no right to not be hated, and for good reason. Hate is an often justifiable, legitimate human emotion. It might say that you hate people who hate, but you still hate. We police the outcomes of hatred. Someone can hate someone and not do anything about it. They might avoid that person a bit more, but they are still free to hate them. The issue arises when that person's hate becomes an action that affects the other person or persons around them, and then we police that action. Someone who discriminates based on an arbitrary characteristic in their hiring process is penalised by the government. Someone who attacks someone because of their religion or their race is, or should be, policed. Someone who harasses someone because of their sex is policed. Policing is and should be enforced on actions, irrespective of intent. Intent is merely a portion of the method for determining guilt, and it is dependent on things that the defendant has said, has written, or has confided to others, not on the feeling of the victim as to why this has happened. The perpetrator must incriminate themselves. Suzanne goes on to moan about police cuts while simultaneously demanding the redistribution of resources to non-violent incidents that aren't even criminal in nature. She says, wolf whistling does indeed sound harmless, but what women are really complaining about is street harassment with an implied threat of violence. Is this a crime or merely antisocial behaviour? If the police won't take it seriously, who will? It is antisocial behaviour, plain and simple. And the implied threat of violence? Some idiot yelling "nice arse" across the street is not an implied threat of violence. The man either believes he is giving a compliment, stupidly, caving to the social pressure to appear masculine in front of his peers, or attempting to get a reaction because his own self-esteem is so low and women won't talk to him. It's not because he hates you. There is no implication unless you choose to find it. You cannot determine the man's intent from this information alone, and nor should you. If the same guy or group of guys is harassing you on a daily basis, there is a number you can call to report harassment. I believe it's 999, because harassment is a crime. And as previously mentioned, if perhaps there were more bobbies on the street, you might find that the harassment decreases in the presence of a member of the constabulary. Finally, Suzanne concludes, an overstretched service cannot deal with this new hate crime of misogyny, although no one is suggesting that attacks based on race, religion or disability should be decriminalised, are they? Well, I'm certainly not suggesting that attacks be decriminalised, nor harassment, Suzanne, but hate crime laws, with their criminalisation of intent first and action second, with their broad and ill-defined clauses going far beyond the remit of actual hate crime, and of course with the determining factor of intent not being the broader context of the accused's life, social background and relationships, but the outrage of the perceived victim, they can stop wasting their time with that one. She goes on, what is being said then is that crimes against property are more important than crimes against women, which is how the law has operated for a long time. Common sense tells us this is just the way it is. If every case of child abuse were brought to court, then there would be no time for anything else. In the justice system, it really is not a case of women and children first, but last. First of all, it's not a crime against women. You want it to be a crime against women, but it isn't a crime against women. Crimes against women are treated almost exactly the same as crimes perpetrated against men. I say almost because some crimes against men are not treated as crimes. Little things like female-to-male rape, domestic violence and harassment, all of which receive little to no credence in the eyes of the law. All of which, you will also notice, are actions and not intents. You want it to be a crime if people don't like you, and you also want to say that if someone shouts an obscene comment in the street, that they should receive a harsher punishment because it's against you than if it was against a man. You're not here trying to criminalise both misogyny and misandry, and if you were, it would be pointless, because already harassment law would then be all-inclusive, and it is. Our laws should be gender, religion, and disability bias-free for good reasons. Stop asking for a privilege above and beyond what everyone else has, simply because of the wiring of your genes. And finally, you mentioned children here for the first time. I will end by simply saying that if every case of child abuse were brought to court, then there would be far more women in prison than now, seeing as they massively overrepresent in child abuse and child murder. Unfortunately, alongside rape cases, the burden of proof is, with necessity, high, and the evidence for such things difficult to obtain due to the incredibly personal and private nature of where the crime takes place. The police are doing the best they can, given the remit that they have been forced to swallow by higher-ups and the PC Brigade, as you so kindly call your ilk. You and your kind are the cause of why your burglary lacked the resources to be solved. Reflect on that. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment below, and if you really loved this video, consider supporting me on Patreon. Link is in the description. Have a great week.